G'day, welcome to Matt's workshop. Have you ever cut out a circle or a shape and you've ended up with a little step in the side where the laser started and finished cutting? You can see here that there's a step where the laser starts and stops. Sometimes it's more pronounced than this. And if I actually put a piece of paper under the acrylic and draw a line going towards the step, the pen will stop at the step. So you'll see that at that location right here, if I take the paper away, that there's not quite meeting up, and it's only by a fraction of a millimeter. So this little step or error here is caused by a deviation in the axes as they move around, and that can be caused by the belts that are incorrectly tensioned. So if you tension up your belts nicely, like I'm going to show you now, we can eliminate that. So let's give it a go. Okay, so I've been asked a few times now, how do I tension the belts on a red and black Chinese laser? So we have the belts running along the Y rails here as well as the X rail, and the belt tensioning works the same on all three rails. So we have two rails here and one rail across here, so we have the three belts on this machine. Now you want to get your Allen keys and tighten up these screws here. Now this applies tension on the belts. They shouldn't be this loose. If you don't get enough tension by tensioning these two screws, then we'll need to reclamp the belt, which I need to do in this case. So the first thing that we do is loosen these top clamps off. Okay, so you've loosened off the top plate here. We don't have to remove it all the way. You just want to be able to freely adjust it, the belt to run through it. Also, loosen off the tensioning screws so that they're in just about 2 or 3 turns so that it holds there steady, and then pull the belt nice and tight, ensuring that it's on the gears at the back. So once they're on the gears front and back, make sure you pull the belt through nice and tight and then clamp it down in that position. It's also good to note that you are very close to the mirror on this side here, and we don't want to knock that mirror to cause it to knock out of alignment. So just be careful that you don't put too much pressure on the mirror mount. Ensuring that once you have it all clamped, it's nice and tight so that the belt won't slip back through that clamp. So that's nice and tight there. You can pop that out of the way if you like it out of the way. And the next thing that we need to do is evenly tension the belt. So we just do it a few turns at a time and watch that this carriage tensioner goes in evenly and it's not crooked. So once you've got your belt nicely tensioned, roughly about a turn, about quarter of a turn without overdoing it, and it should be just nice and tight. So once you've actually tensioned the belt, it's nice and tight and you're happy with your results, then what you need to do is move these lock nuts down and tighten them against this rail so that the tensioning screws don't move or vibrate out. So tighten those in with a spanner. Then you repeat the same process for all belts that you have. So it's also important that after you've tensioned your belts, so that you haven't knocked the axis out of square. So grab yourself a square and run along the rail and make sure that it's square. If you need to adjust, you can adjust by using the gears at the end of the drive shaft. So this is the belt for the side rails and the pulley here. So if we loosen off this gear, this pulley will run freely, which will allow us to make our X rail back to 90 degrees, and then once it's back at 90 degrees, tighten these back up. So there are 2 grub screws here. We just loosen those off so that this gear will run freely on that drive rod, and then we can align our rail. So once everything is square again to the rails, what you'll want to do is do some test cuts. One of the good test cuts to do is a calibration. You can check out my previous video on calibrating the X and Y axis. So I'm going to do that test here now. So for this test, I'm cutting out the 100mm square. So that will enable us to check our calibration of our X and Y, but also check to make sure that the pieces are cutting out squarely. So let's start that. So as you can see, I've cut this out 100 millimeters X and Y. It's measuring up at 100 millimeters. It's nice cutting nice and square in the corners, and both axes are 100 millimeters. So we've calibrated it successfully, adjusting the rails, and now we're going to do a circle test. So in this test I'm going to cut a 100 millimeter circle, and we're looking at the start and finish point of the circle and the edges to make sure that there's no stepping or backlash from our belts. So this position right here is where the laser head started and stopped on this circle test, and there's no step at all there anymore. So if we actually look at the acrylic that I was cutting the circles, if we draw a line, you can actually feel a distinctive step in that cut where it starts and finishes, and that is the same on the red one here. There's a definite step where if you actually draw a line around it, you would see it step. If I do the same with the timber, there's no step at all. It's just a nice smooth arch. So by adjusting the belts, we've eliminated that backlash. It may not always eliminate it, but it's definitely improved it. So thanks for visiting Matt's workshop. I hope you found this video useful, and hopefully you can eliminate some of those irregularities in your cuts on your laser machine just by doing some belt tensioning, making sure that the X and Y axis rails are square and aligned and calibrated. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you haven't already, subscribe and press the notification bell to be notified when I release new videos. You'll find the link to my social media and website in the description below. And until next time, take care. Cheers.